Hello and welcome everyone to our webcast this morning. My name is Scott Geffrey. I'm responsible for the Informatica Marketplace. We're going to talk to you today a little bit about the Marketplace, what it is, share with you some of the solutions that we have on the Marketplace, and we'll walk you through some very specific examples of some free apps that are on the Marketplace that you can use in your day-to-day activities to help you be more productive. Throughout the webcast, if you have any questions, you can enter them in your command console, and we'll take all questions and answer them at the end of the presentation. So please, if you have anything that pops up, feel free to log the question, and we'll get to it at the end. So to jump right in here, one of the questions that used to come up a few years ago when we started the Informatica Marketplace is what is a marketplace and what does it do? And at the time, there were a few notable examples. You had app stores like Google Play and the Apple App Store. You had the Windows Store, and they were fairly restricted to mobile applications. And you could get apps that would extend the power of your mobile app and take advantage of the ecosystem of folks that had contributed things. Over time, the number of marketplaces grew. You had Salesforce App Exchange as a notable example in the business world. You've got Amazon Web Services Marketplace. And you've got even more types of marketplaces today, including a health insurance marketplace for U.S. citizens to buy health insurance plans. And what's common across all of these marketplaces is they're really designed around a very specific area. They're intended to give complementary solutions that extend the core value offering of that particular subject, whether it be a mobile phone or whether it be a CRM application, and help fill in the gaps in that solution and provide an ecosystem where people can contribute and acquire solutions in that space. So the Informatica Marketplace is very similar. It's the same concept, which is it's a data integration ecosystem. And the players and contributors and folks that participate in this ecosystem run the gamut from partners, ISVs and SIs that contribute solutions to the marketplace. They're there to strengthen their partnership with Informatica, make their solutions available, generate awareness for the offerings that they have. Consumers, folks like Informatica customers and Informatica prospects, folks that are faced with data integration challenges can come to the marketplace, find new solutions, evaluate products that they may be interested in, complementary products, or even request ideas for new products or capabilities that don't exist today. Another key constituent of the Informatica Marketplace ecosystem is our developer community. A lot of folks over the years that Informatica has been in existence have created a whole host of very useful utilities, tools, scripts, productivity applications, and they contribute those to the marketplace. They make those available for free, and they share their ideas and their concepts with the community. Conversely, developers, real practitioners, are coming to the marketplace to acquire these solutions, to download them into their environment and really help solve some of the challenges that they're faced on a day-to-day basis in their data integration needs. And then finally, of course, Informatica is a key element and a contributor to this ecosystem where it allows Informatica to enable our customers with new solutions, engage and interact. We contribute a variety of our own solutions to the marketplace, and we actively get feedback on those solutions and solicit feedback from the community on what areas need to be improved, what areas that we can add and augment to our portfolio suite. And so Informatica definitely takes part in this ecosystem and drives a lot of value from its existence. Some key statistics on the marketplace in terms of just the raw numbers. The marketplace has over 1,300 apps and services that you can leverage. So a whole host of applications, a whole host of things that will help you be more productive. We'll talk a little bit about what those are in a minute. We have over 15,000 monthly downloads, so a lot of traction in terms of valuable content. People are finding things that are useful, they're bringing them into their environment, and they're really being successful with the solutions that are on the marketplace. And the marketplace really is a community. It's a community of over 100,000 registered members. So there's a very broad audience that are contributing and that are using the marketplace to help them be more successful. In terms of overall apps, today's webcast is about the free apps that are on the marketplace, and we certainly have a lot to choose from. In fact, over 60% or nearly 60% of the apps on the marketplace are free to use or try right now today. And so there's really very little barriers to folks getting started in acquiring these solutions and using them immediately. And the solutions really range in categories, obviously very heavy weighted towards data integration solutions, but there's a lot of other subject areas where the marketplace has some valuable content. A lot of content in the cloud, data quality assets on the marketplace, MDM, as well as other categories such as ILM, CEP, ultra messaging, etc. So a real broad swath of solutions on the marketplace in a variety of categories. Taking a deeper dive into what's contained in each of these categories, if you look at data integration, a whole host of things around mappings and maplets. We've got utilities for data integration, connectors, code testing and deployment tools, job scheduling, a whole host of utilities around data integration, and we'll talk about some of those today. Data quality, you've got rules and reference data, you've got health checks, there's a variety of accelerators and services that are on the marketplace that can help you with your data quality needs and data augmentation needs. Cloud data integration, connectors, templates, data loaders, a whole host of solutions that run within Informatica Cloud in a cloud environment that don't require any on-premise technology, a lot of extensions on the marketplace for the cloud products as well. So just a real broad set of solutions out there across a variety of subject areas. And then in terms of the marketplace itself, there's a lot of really valuable content on the marketplace. So if you go to the marketplace and you find a particular solution that you're interested in, you'll notice right away that there's a lot of things that will help you get educated about what that solution is. Very robust descriptions of the solution. What are the key features of the app or service that's on the marketplace? A lot of times there'll be a demo, either a video demo or screenshots that help you get a little bit more knowledgeable about that application specifically. Specifications, what versions of Informatica tools is it compatible with? What does it run on? Support information. Through the marketplace, we try to be very transparent, especially with our third-party solutions, to give you the information that you need to be able to reach out to that solution provider if you have a question, if you're having some challenges or some concerns. And so we're very open with the information that we provide for all of our sellers, including their full contact information. So at any time, you can make a direct connection with that solution provider to get more detail, as well as a variety of additional resources, including white papers, demos, those sorts of things. So through the marketplace, we make available a very, very comprehensive set of information because we want to make sure it's a one-stop shop for you to get all the information you need when you're evaluating a new solution, learning about it, or just determining if it's right for your needs. Some other key marketplace features are our ratings and reviews. So through the marketplace, you can see what the other folks that have used the solution have thought about it. What kind of ratings have they given to it? Also, what kind of reviews and comments have they contributed? So a lot of times you can learn a lot about the solutions just based on what other people that have used it have said about it. And in fact, this is a great mechanism where the folks that have contributed solutions can get feedback directly from the community to augment it. So for example, in this last comment here, there was a lot of feedback around a particular tool, and the contributor of that tool took that feedback, baked it into the tool, released a new version that incorporated a lot of that. So a real two-way conversation between the folks that are consuming these solutions and the folks that are contributing them. One important thing about the marketplace is our seal of approval. So every solution that gets posted to the marketplace goes through this process whereby we examine the solution. We bring it in to Informatica. We ensure that it does what it says it's going to do. We ensure that it's safe to be deployed into your environment. We ensure there's no nasty viruses or malware that you're going to discover in an unanticipated way. And so we really step through the process to make sure that you're comfortable that anything you use from the Informatica is going to be safe and that you can trust it in your environment. So that's a little bit about the marketplace as well as our capabilities and some of the content that we have. What I want to spend the rest of our time this morning talking about is an example of some of the solutions that we have on the marketplace, and we'll do that by kind of walking you through a real world example of a data migration project, and we'll highlight some of the tools that are on the marketplace that are free to use immediately that can help you in some common challenges. So we'll kind of frame up the discussion talking about our velocity data migration methodology. So if you're not familiar with this, this is kind of Informatica's best practices guide around how you do data migration projects. And so Velocity has a lot of great content out there. You can go check it out on the Informatica website. But really, it's designed to be a guide for data migration projects. And if we walk through the different elements, it kind of starts with pulling data from a source system. This is a data migration example, so we would be pulling information potentially from mainframe applications, relational databases, even flat files. And the first step is we're going to bring this data into a staging environment. So we're going to acquire the data from our source, and that's going to require for us to do some data profiling. The next step, of course, is to convert that into a preload staging environment. We'll want to run some validation rules against this data, and then we'll also want to do some exception processing for that data that falls out of these validation rules. Finally, we'll take the data, we'll load it into our target location, whether that be a packaged application, maybe a big data appliance, or a cloud application. And in that phase, we'll want to run a quality scorecard. We'll want to make sure that we have good metrics and insight into how well that migration has been completed, what sorts of issues are encountered during that. And then throughout all of this process, we have the audit and the lineage, so we can see at every step of the process success and failure metrics, exceptions, and then kind of tracing the data from source to target. So this is the overall velocity data migration methodology. And if we look at a little deeper dive into the project stages of a data migration and the typical challenges that are faced by Informatica customers, it really is a whole host of things. So starting with the analyze phase, an analyst obviously is going to be conducting this phase, and they'll run into challenges like unknown data types, multiple formats for the data, missing values, invalid entries, a whole host of problems that you run into with source data. When you get into the build phase, an architect and a developer are going to be the key players in this stage, and there's a lot of lack of automation. You're doing the same things over and over again when you're building out your data migration project, and this can be a very time-consuming phase of the overall project. Certainly testing, another time-consuming phase of the project where you've got to really go through all of the elements. You've got to really understand what's happening in the environment. You've got to test against coding standards. And this takes a lot of time. A lot of times you're manually reviewing objects. You're going through these things in a very kind of ad hoc way because there's just so much to get through, and that takes a lot of time. And then once your project is completed and it's in operational mode, you've got issues like migrating code from one environment to another, monitoring your environments to make sure that they're stable and they're reliable, and then preventing outages for your environment in a production way. So these are a lot of challenges that I'm sure folks will be very familiar with that have done data migration projects. And here in a second, we're going to step you through a variety of tools that are available in the marketplace that really ease the pains of some of these challenges. But first, obviously, no conversation around free data integration tools would be complete without talking about a couple of tools that Informatica makes available for free via the marketplace. So whether you're doing on-premise deployments or you're doing cloud deployments, the marketplace has a solution for you from Informatica. So for our on-premise customers, we have PowerCenter Express. This is a free application. You can get it today from the marketplace. It's a fully featured, robust data integration tool. It's a lightweight version of PowerCenter, but it's very powerful. It has a graphical design environment, a full range of data transformations. You can use workflow tools to create these multi-step transformations, and it even has a midstream data viewer so that you can look at your transformations as they make their way through the project to ensure that you're getting the results that you want. So a very powerful tool, free, completely free to use from the Informatica Marketplace. On the cloud side, we have Informatica Cloud, again, free to trial via the marketplace, a cloud-based tool that has automated data loading and extraction capabilities, scheduling and workflows, transformations, and a lot of enterprise functionality like fine-grained access controls, delegated administration, all kind of presented in this easy-to-use, easy-to-configure, point-and-click user interface. So a couple of free tools from Informatica available via the marketplace. But stepping back to our example of a data migration, the use case that we're going to talk about here is we're going to take a a flat file contact data file, and we're going to move it from that source file, this flat file, into a relational database or an application. And so the first step, as we talked about our velocity migration methodology, is data profiling. And so the first tool we'll talk about is PowerCenter Express. This is our free tool. We're in the analysis phase here of the project. And PowerCenter Express is actually very powerful in understanding your source data. A lot of times the most challenging part of a data migration project is just understanding what your data looks like. And so PowerCenter Express can really help this on the profiling side. So in our example, we'll take a flat file, which is this contact data, and we're going to profile it. So we brought it into an environment, and we're going to profile our data. We're using PowerCenter Express to do this, and we're going to run this profile. And what we're going to see right away is what's typical of a lot of files is you've got some anomalies in the data. So here, our contact ID, we have 20% of our values are null. So if that's going to be a primary key for us, we're going to want to make sure we address that issue. First name, another problem here. We've got some strange entries here. We've got Captain America, Queen Leah, a lot of folks that I'm sure are not Informatica customers that we're going to want to weed out. We've got strange data patterns. You've got a country field here, but it has a lot of unnecessary spaces. So that points to potentially some bad data that we're going to want to address. And then Social Security number. Some strange values here. Obviously, we don't want letters in our Social Security number. So PowerCenter Express is really helping to identify some of these key data anomalies that we're going to want to address later on in the project. So very powerful data profiling tool, really give you a good head start on understanding what your data is and what it looks like. The next step is, of course, to take our data and import it into our relational staging area. So a lot of times when you're doing a simple import with minimal transformations, it's not a challenging task to do, but if you've got a lot of files, this can become very cumbersome. And in fact, if you want to try to help enrich that file and maybe add a few fields into the data file, it can be very difficult to do just doing this manually. So the Stage Mapping Generator trial is a great tool that you can get today for free. It's a trial. And what it actually enables you to do is work with flat files a lot more easily. So in this case, we have our source file, we have our contact data, and our account data, which are CSV files. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to configure my, customize my configuration file. I might want to do some date conversion on this flat file. I might want to specify the date-time format that I want in my target here. And then I want to add a couple of fields. I want to add in some fields that tell me when I imported this data and what some of the address types are. So now I can run this file, and what it'll do is it'll actually create the XML that I can import into PowerCenter that has kind of categorized this data for me. It'll tell me what the data types are. It'll tell me lengths and normalizations. And so instead of having to look through this data in a manual flat file, which a lot of times doesn't have metadata, I don't know what some of these fields are, the Stage Mapping Generator will actually do that for me. It will tell me what these data fields are, what their lengths are, and some of those things. So really helpful, especially in working with flat files. So the next step in our process here, we're still in the, now we've moved to kind of the build phase, is a tool called DBMetaData. And if you're working in a distributed team, a lot of data integration ICCs are split geographically. You've got potentially your business analysts and your architects in an onshore organization, and then you've got your developers in an offshore organization. And you want your offshore developers to be productive. You want them to start working on your project right away, but they don't always have access to that source system immediately. It can take time to provision accounts. It can take time to get access. And while you're doing all of that, your offshore resources are idle and they're non-productive. So DBMetaData is a great solution that will enable you to get schema right to your developers so they can start working, even if they don't have connectivity. So for DBMetaData, what we're going to do is we're going to take our data source here. This is our database. And this is what we're going to be working on, and our developers are going to be working on, but they're not going to have access to it immediately. So we're going to take our list of tables that we want the developers to work on. We're going to run the DBMetaData utility with this list of tables as an input. And this utility is going to actually generate the XML that I can import back into PowerCenter that's going to show me all of the different tables that I might want my developers to work on. So I'm going to import this XML into PowerCenter, and right away now I have all the tables in my offshore environment. My developers can start working on creating the mappings and the transformations, and then when they get connectivity to the source systems, they'll already have a lot of this work done. They'll already have been able to build and be very productive because they've been working with the data in the data structures that they're going to be using in real time. So very, very handy tool to get your offshore teams jump-started. So the next step now, we've got kind of our source data profiled. We understand what the data looks like. We understand the metadata around that. We've got all of the source systems mapped out. Now we're going to go through the process of starting to build our mappings. And this is really the most time-consuming part of the process, or a very time-consuming part of the process, is just mapping out all the transformations and doing all of the things that you need to do. And this is where the Informatica Marketplace can really help. On the Marketplace, we have a whole host of predefined templated mappings that you can use right away to be productive without having to recreate them yourself. So the first step we're going to do in our mapping is we want to standardize our string. We're going to want to, fix the issues that we saw in the address field, or we're going to want to trim some string lengths. And a lot of these things are predefined, pre-configured transformations that you can grab from the Marketplace, import into your environment, and just start using and customizing right away. So now that we've kind of standardized some of our strings here, we've removed some special characters and some white spaces, the next step that we're want to do is we want to validate some of our standard fields. So social security number, for example, phone number, postal codes, these sorts of data fields that have very standard formats that need to be in that format for us to ensure that they're valid. You can pull a sample mapping right from the Marketplace that has all these functions predefined, and you can put them right into your mapping and eliminate the need to kind of recreate some of these functions. The next step is we're going to want to look at primary keys. So we saw in our example, we had some null primary key fields. So this mapping, validate key stream fields, enables you to just look through your source file, make sure that your fields aren't null, and make sure you've got valid entries in the key string. So again, something you can just grab right from the Marketplace, import into your environment, saves you the time of having to create it. Same thing with country name, making sure that the country names are valid, making sure that you aren't having some erroneous data values in there. A lot of validation of data going on here. The next thing we want to address is those suspect names, the Captain Americas, the dummies, the Queen Latifahs in there. And the PowerCenter Data Quality Starter Pack trial is a great library of functions that has a whole host of typical suspect names that I can identify and filter out for you, as well as parsing dates and country names. So a real robust, free-to-use data quality starter pack that can cleanse some of the common errors and some of the common dummy values that we see in data that ordinarily you'd have to kind of look at one by one and kind of have some human judgment. This really automates a lot of that for you, and you can get that from the Marketplace. The next thing is mapping some of your source to target code. So a lot of times you have a data file where the account type might say something like enterprise, but in the target system you want to map that to a standardized value of like commercial. And so this source to target XREF lookup will actually do that mapping for you. It'll make sure that all of your enterprise values are mapped to commercial when they come into the target system. So this is a predefined mapping that you can grab from the Marketplace. Now that I've built my mapping and I've kind of got all my standard transformations in it, the next thing that I want to do, of course, is capture my exceptions. And so predefined mapping for you, a normalizer for column level logging, is a great predefined maplet that will capture these errors. It will shunt them off to an exceptions table so we don't load them into our target system. And then we can take that data and we can work on addressing the errors later on. So a great mapping to capture exceptions in our workflow. And then finally what we can do is we can load our result statistics into an audit table so that as we run this mapping, we'll have a lot of granularity into success and failure, how many rows were loaded, how many exceptions do we have. And this is a great best practice to make sure that as your mappings run, you get a lot of visibility into how well they've performed. So, we kind of end up with this with this very complex, very comprehensive mapping that we've been able to build in literally minutes by using a lot of the standard mappings that are available on the marketplace for free. This kind of a mapping that might take hours or days or maybe even weeks for a development team, you can literally piece together through a lot of solutions that are free on the marketplace and put yourself together a pretty comprehensive solution. So moving on in our project, we've got our mapping built, and now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check our coding standards. So a big part of any data migration project is ensuring, especially with large distributed teams, that everyone's adhering to the coding standards that have been set by the organization. And so ICC Utility is actually a utility that's been contributed by Informatica Professional Services, and what it'll do is it extracts data from a PowerCenter repository, and it ensures that your coding standards are being adhered to by creating reports for you and your administrators and your architects to review. So let's take a look at how this works. We've got our mapping here, and reviewing the coding standards manually obviously would be very time-consuming and error-prone. So what we'll do is we'll take our ICC utility, we'll point it at the repository folder in the workflow, and we get this great document here that will not only highlight instances of code violations, such as output port names not in a standard format, and other errors, transformation names not in a standard format, but in addition to highlighting errors, what it also does is it gives us a great documentation tool where we don't have to manually document workflows, but it gives you a lot of information around what the mapping is doing, what the source targeted transformations are. And so this is a great utility to auto-generate documentation for your workflows. And as we all know, generating documentation is not only time-consuming, but very tedious to do. And so this tool really helps shortcut and streamline that process. And this is available free from the Informatica Marketplace. If you want to take a step further and you actually want to clean up some of these errors, the ICC tool will help identify those errors so that you can go and clean them up. But the Excelling Mapping Cleanup tool will actually take the extra step of cleaning up these issues for you. So similar to ICC Utility, I can point it at a mapping in a workflow. It'll highlight, we can see here that our expression ports aren't ordered in the standard format, so that's going to cause us some problems later. And what I can do is I can run the Excelling Mapping Cleanup tool. I can point it at the PowerCenter Mapping XML, and I get a whole host of reports here around my mapping. I can see things like default true conditions. I can see things like port attributes here. I can run this report and it'll show me that I've got port attribute mismatches. So similar to ICC Utility, I can get a error report that shows all of the challenges that I've got and all the coding standards that I've violated. But now using Excello, what I can actually do is I can fix my problem. So as we saw earlier, we had the transformations in the non-standard port ordering. Now what I can do is I can take Excello and I can tell it to fix that. And I can run that tool that will fix those port ordering issues. And so without having to bring this back to my development team, I can actually have my administrator just run the tool, auto-fix these sorts of issues, and really shortcut the time to fix some of these standard errors. So really powerful utility for adhering to coding standards and cleaning up some of the issues. The next step is we want to basically move our mappings from a dev to test to prod environment. So we've done all of our development and all of our work in our dev environment. We've got to move that to our test and then ultimately our prod environment. And that requires a development group control files. And so with building control files, there's a standard way to do that in PowerCenter, but that's a pretty time-consuming process. So if we look at all of the objects that need to be migrated from dev to test or dev to prod, it's a pretty large set of groups, a pretty large set of objects. So I can select them, and then PowerCenter provides me with this wizard, and I select my groups, I select my attributes, I'm checking and unchecking boxes, I'm going through this whole workflow. This can obviously be very error-prone, and it's difficult to enforce standards. It's difficult to get all of your development teams to be checking the same boxes and doing the same things. With Control File Builder, we actually use a control file to set all of those parameters ahead of time and really enable us to automate that series of steps that we saw. So we can run the Control File Builder at the prompt, provide the deployment group name and the deployment file, and it will set all of those checkboxes and those parameter files for us. So we can see, here's all the defaults that we've set. Our administrator can create this file, which sets for the organization the standards for doing control groups. We run this utility, and we'll actually create the deployment group control files for us. So we don't have to go through that process one by one and creating and setting all the options, especially if we've got a lot of migrations from dev to test or dev to prod. That can be pretty time consuming. This automates that all for us. So by creating these deployment groups, they can be used and automated moving from one environment to another. So very helpful, very handy utility to shortcut that process. Kind of getting towards the end here, now that we've moved our code from our dev to test to prod, now we're in the operate phase. So our jobs are up and running, they're working, they're in production, but we may want to modify parameters. And so there's a lot of things that are very error prone around the hierarchy of files, color coding for valid and invalid entries. You know, the parameter files are really just kind of manually maintained, and so that's very, very time consuming to make sure that you're identifying errors and spotting issues. The parameter file engine really helps you visually look at your parameter files and identify errors and problems. So as I open up this parameter file, I can see right away there's an invalid entry here, and this is invalid because I forgot a period in the command line prompt that probably by eyeballing it I wouldn't have seen. So this parameter file engine will actually identify that error for me because it has the intelligence built in to recognize valid and invalid entries, and then I can go about fixing that in a very wizard-driven way. So rather than typing into my text file a new parameter for my file, I can actually walk through this GUI wizard. I can set the different folder names, I can set the different file names, the batch IDs, and I can add them over incrementally step by step to create a valid section in the parameter file. So this is a great way, especially in a graphical sort of GUI-based way, for you to build parameter files that don't have you working with text files, that don't have you running into issues with typos and fat fingering of entries that are going to cause you a lot of problems and a lot of headache. So Parameter File Engine, a free tool that you can get from the Informatica Marketplace today, and then you can use right away in your environment to really streamline this part of the process. The next solution in the operate phase that's free to use is the XML Analyzer for PowerCenter. And so this is a tool where you may have an administrator that's ready to push workflows into production. Maybe there's a change to a workflow, maybe there's a new set of workflows into production, and the administrator really needs to understand what's in this workflow. I need to get a little bit better of a sense of what's going on here. And so the XML Analyzer will actually give the administrator, in a very GUI-based sort of report-driven way, information around that XML. So here I'm going to choose the PowerCenter export file, and with this report I can see a lot of information organized in a very approachable way. I can see, you know, what the workflow properties are without having to dig into the workflows themselves. I can see the session properties. I can look for optimizations like commit intervals and commit types. I can look at things like the truncate table option, making sure that's set appropriately, and even look at some of the source to target mapping details to make sure if I'm making a change to a mapping, maybe I'm changing a field, maybe I'm removing a field, I can track the lineage of that change throughout my workflow to make sure I'm not going to have some unintended consequences. So a very report-driven way to give you a lot of information that historically would require you to dig through the source mappings, dig through your environment to try to tease these things out. This surfaces it up for you in a very approachable way. So another great free tool, XML Analyzer, that can give you a lot of insight into these mappings and workflows. And finally, the last kind of app to show you here is around enterprise job scheduling. So a lot of times you're scheduling jobs in your environment, and that can be done with PowerCenter, but what PowerCenter can't do is it can't schedule your jobs in conjunction with all of the other things you have going on in your environment. So you may have operational downtime for your servers. You may have other jobs that are running outside of PowerCenter, And you want to make sure that your jobs are going to be successful. They're not going to run into some of these other scheduling things that are going on. And so Skybot is a great tool. It has a trial out there, a free trial that you can use that gives you a real graphical-based scheduling tool that will control all of the different jobs in your environment, not just PowerCenter. So if we look at how this works, we're going to take our workflow for the developed mapping that we had in our example here, and I'm going to want to schedule this workflow to run. And so I'm going to integrate this into our overall data integration processes. I'm going to set some SLAs. If the workflow doesn't run, I can automatically notify an administrator of that. But the power of Skybot is really here. And looking at all the other things that I have going on in environment, I can see through this kind of bar chart, Gantt chart sort of a view what other sorts of workflows, what other sorts of jobs are running in my environment, so I can schedule my PowerCenter workflow to run where it's not going to conflict with some other downtime job or some other job that's going to potentially cause problems. So a very GUI-based way to schedule your jobs in conjunction with everything else that's going on in your environment. So that's just a quick sample of some of the apps that are on the marketplace. They're free to use. And if we look back at the top of the conversation around all of these challenges that we saw in a typical data migration project, we can see that by using the Informatica Marketplace, you can actually solve all of these problems using free utilities. Bring them into your environment, execute them, run them, and really eliminate a lot of these headaches. So, we showed you a few apps that can really make you more successful, really help you be productive. But there's actually a couple more that I want to show you. We'll call these bonus apps, because these are some pretty powerful utilities that we haven't covered, but that have been very popular with our folks that come to the marketplace and that download our solutions. So the first tool, there's two of them that I want to show you. The first tool is called Autotype Excel Macro. So this is in the build phase, and this was contributed by one of our developers. And so this is a developer-contributed solution that he built that really helps streamline and automate some very tedious sorts of things. So if you think about building a mapping, and we'll get right into Autotype Excel, it uses the power of Excel to automate some pretty mundane things. So in this example, we have to create 200 new ports because we want to do some string trim operations. So using Autotype Excel Macro, we can actually create these new ports in an automated way rather than doing it in the GUI and doing it step by step. Excel will automatically create all these new ports for us. I can use Excel to enter my expression in once and then substitute the field over and over again for all 200 ports. So I have a trim string here. I've got now 200 trim string expressions that I created just via dragging in Excel. And now using the import button in Autotype Excel Macro, I can plop those right into my mapping. So instead of having to literally type these out one by one over and over into the expression builder, by using Autotype Excel Macro, I've literally trimmed down this time from hours to mere seconds using the power of Excel. So very powerful utility to really streamline and shorten the time it takes to do some of these mundane activities. Another great utility, the second one that I want to show you here in our bonus apps category, is the iExport Normalizer utility. And what iExport Normalizer will do is it'll actually compare PowerCenter XML. So if you're looking at, for example, a development environment and a test environment, or a test and a prod, you want to make sure that you understand the differences between XML. And you can use a standard file comparison utility. There's a lot of them out there. But the problem with typical file compare utilities is when you export XML from two different PowerCenter environments, the ordering of the objects may be different. The content may all be the same, but the ordering might be different. And in a typical file export utility, that's going to throw all kinds of errors because it's going to do a line-by-line comparison. iExport Normalizer is different because it's intelligent enough to know the difference between just a typical text file and PowerCenter XML. So a typical file comparison utility, you'll see all of these errors because they're just out of order. And we know those aren't errors, but it's a file utility thinks they are. So with iExport Normalizer, I'm going to compare my production environment to my QA environment. And I'm going to want to see what are the differences in the XML. And this utility will highlight trivial differences, such as the folder name, versus critical difference, like the number of rows to test. And it'll highlight those in different colors. so you can ignore things you know aren't that relevant. In this case, I've got an error with my number of rows to test that's highlighted that. I've highlighted a difference here in terms of the truncate the target table option. In production, it's yes, and in test, it's no. So that's an issue that I'm going to want to fix. I can compare my two mappings here after I've made the changes, and I can make sure that these issues are fixed. So in QA, we've seen that the missing link issue has been fixed. We've seen that the truncate table option has been resolved, and so these errors can go back to green or back to being flagged as normal. Precision, for example, was originally 1,000, and now it's down to 10. So this is a great intelligent comparison utility that will help you really improve comparing test and development objects to production, and really highlight the critical differences that you're going to want to address versus some of the trivial or things you don't really care about in your environment. So a lot of great utilities on the marketplace. There's a lot of things that you can use in your environment, and we've just shown a couple of these things today. As I said, there's over 700 free tools and utilities on the marketplace, and so the marketplace is a great opportunity for you to leverage the power of the ecosystem. We have over 1,300 apps and services to build your productivity. You don't need to build these things in your environment. You can find them on the marketplace, and they can really help you leverage an ecosystem of our partners, developers, and Informatica, really accelerate your product delivery. And through ideation, you can contribute your own ideas. You can contribute your solutions. You can ask the community for things that you'd like to see. You can request white spaces for Informatica tools. And so really a very powerful solution for you to use in the marketplace. So I'd encourage you to visit it. The URL is marketplace.informatica.com. Check it out today. Get started with your productivity. Thank you very much for your time and participation in the webcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Marketplace team. We'd love to hear from you. Again, check it out at marketplace.informatica.com. Thank you very much.